Good morning, everyone. I'm going to tell you about, basically about 25 years of research on Steller sea lions. A little bit more, actually. Let's just get right into it and tell you about some of the changes we've seen over the years. A little bit of background first. Steller sea lions, they range across the North Pacific Ocean from California, all across Alaska, Bering Sea, over to Russia, the Koreas, and Japan. In Alaska, especially in western Alaska, we saw a huge decline between about the mid-1970s and about 2000, 80% decline, which is really fast and dramatic. And so this species was listed as endangered. The western stock was listed as endangered in 1997. But the eastern stock was delisted in 2013. So here we are in the big scheme of things. The Chiswell Islands, where we do our work, we're in the eastern Gulf of Alaska portion of the endangered population, so we are within that western distinct population segment that is considered endangered. The work we do on Chiswell Island, that's part of the Alaska Maritime National Wildlife Refuge, and of course we have permits to do our research on this island and other islands, in addition to National Marine Fisheries Service permits to conduct research on endangered pinniped. And what we saw here at Chiswell Island pretty much mirrors what happened throughout the western stock of the Steller sea lions. Earliest surveys we have of the area date back to 1957, but we saw just a pretty consistent decline throughout all these decades. And here's an image from 1982, compare that to summer of 2002. Just a huge obvious difference, not just the number of sea lions hauled out on shore, but you can see them just swarming in the water just right next to shore there. So very obvious and dramatic changes in the population over these decades. Possible reasons for the decline that have been researched over the years. Potentially predation, increased predation. Fisheries conflicts. There were estimated tens of thousands of sea lions that were killed directly by fishermen shooting them, being caught in nets, but also indirect effects such as competition for the same prey resources. This is kind of a big issue back in the 1970s, but not so much in more recent years. Another big thing that happened, there were some ecosystem changes. The warming waters out there seem to cause a change in the abundance of different fishes out there. There used to be a high abundance of these small fatty forage fish like capelin, herring, sand lance, and since the 1980s there's a much greater abundance of less fatty fish like pollock and cod, and thought that this caused an energetic compromise to the sea lions by feeding more on these less fatty fish. Also, disease and contaminants have been studied quite a bit, but nobody really thinks this is a major cause for their decline. Contaminants, especially mercury, might be a little bit of a concern still out in the Aleutian Islands, but we're not seeing a big issue in our area for contaminants. So this is the big thing I'm going to focus on today, ecosystem changes and what's been happening out there, especially over the past decade. So what we've been doing here at the Sea Life Center, we've been had this remote video system in place back far back as 1998, and it's the longest ongoing research project here at the Sea Life Center. It's a good time to acknowledge my co-author on this presentation and many of our publications, Pam Parker, who has been working with me on this project since the summer of 2000, and it's just wouldn't be possible to carry on this project for so long without her. She knows these animals out there better than anyone. She continues to have great insights and inspiration and new ideas that help keep this project going. So I really want to thank Pam for that. So the lion's share of what we do, or maybe I should say the sea lion's share of what we do, has to do with this remote video observation system we have out on the island. And it was initially put in place by Seymour Wildlife Systems back in 1998, and we've collected a lot of data from those video cameras back then. They were analog based, but the technology's changed over the years, and it's gotten more user-friendly, and we put in a new digital video system in 2017. And we've pretty much taken over maintenance and care of this video system since then. Not without issues from time to time, but it's been a good system. We have a 12-volt battery bank out there that's charged up by solar panels and wind generators that keep our cameras running, and a network switch out there that we can power our cameras and view them through. Okay, a little bit of background of what we've learned over the early years of this study. Maternal care. One of the things we looked at early on was the duration of the perinatal periods. The perinatal period is the time from when a female sea lion gives birth until her next foraging trip to sea. And then they start alternating foraging trip to sea to nursing their pups on shore for about a year or more. And the duration of the perinatal period is thought to be a good indirect indicator of how well fed they are before giving birth. The longer the perinatal period, the more likely they are to have been well fed and can stay on shore longer with their pups. And some evidence for this is seen in studies done at NU and Nuevo, where perinatal periods of 6.7 days on average during good years, and during El Nino years, it's out to less than half that. What we've seen at Chiswell Island during the early years of the study, some of the longest perinatal periods for sea lions that we know of, at 10.7 days. So I think these sea lions were being pretty well fed, at least before giving birth. What we also looked at in the early years of the study is reproductive rates, or the proportion of mature females that are giving birth in any given year. Back just before the decline started, back in the mid-1970s, reproductive rates were pretty good, around 67%, but they declined to about 52-53% during the height of the decline. What we found for the females at Chiswell Island is during the 2000s, they were pretty darn good, up around 70%. So it doesn't seem to be a problem there. And that dotted line just has to do with a population study that National Marine Fisheries Service put out based on proportions of adult females and pups on brook reefs throughout the range, and that turned out to be somewhat bogus. So the proper way to calculate reproductive rates is to track adult females over time and determine which proportions of them are giving birth in a given year. So also during the early years of the study, the number of pups born on Chiswell Island, we saw a pretty good increase over that time period to a peak of about 127 in 2015. So things have been improving during the 2000s at Chiswell Island. Juvenile survival also looked pretty good for our animals at Chiswell Island. This figure from a publication in 2014 showed that survival to age 1 and age 2 was actually pretty similar to what it was estimated during the peak decline of Steller sea lions. But survival to age 3 and age 4, we saw a big improvement in our Chiswell juvenile sea lions compared to that of the decline. And overall, the cumulative survival to age 4 was double that what it was during the decline. And we also estimated adult female survival greater than 90% over the 2000s, so it's been pretty good. And we've taken all this data and put it into population models and compared that with survey counts and everything, and determined that sea lions actually have been doing really good in our area between about the early 2000s and mid-2010s. Well, shoot, how the hell are we supposed to figure out how a sea lion population is declining if by the time we start studying, they're not declining anymore? We're scratching our heads just trying to figure things out over time. Happy to keep this project going because something happened in the mid-2010s here. This North Pacific marine heat wave hit the coast out here and just wreaked havoc on a lot of animals out there in the Gulf of Alaska. And more familiarly known as the blob. So this warm water blob, where temperatures peaked about 2 to 3 degrees Celsius above normal. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but it just had a huge widespread effect on almost all the creatures out there in Gulf of Alaska. And we saw declines in humpback whales, sea lions, the fish, and a lot of other things out there. And so, luckily for us, we have been collecting scat samples from Steller sea lions prior to 2015 and earlier, and subsequent to that. The idea early on was just to see if we could figure out if there's some sort of correlation between diet and the proportion of females that are giving birth in any given year. And we had no idea that the blob was about to hit. So it's great that we had these samples, and we were able to finally get these samples analyzed and the data analyzed from the samples and published just a couple of years ago. What we found was that in the diet of sea lions, prior to the blob, we saw a pretty good proportion of capelin and herring. These are those small fatty forage fish that they generally do well on. Good proportions of those in their diet, but after 2016, they dropped right off in the diet of Steller sea lions in our area. And what we started seeing more of are things like lumpsuckers, polychaetes, sandlands, sculpins, skates, snailfishes. A lot of those things are showing up in higher proportion in the sea lion diet, and we actually saw a 12% increase in the diet diversity. And this just gave you the impression that they seem to be just scrounging around on the ocean floor for whatever they could find, because a lot of these other species are bottom dwellers. Okay, so what should an adult female sea lion do when times are tough and there's not enough food out there for them? Well, life history theory suggests that adult survival should take precedence over so many other things for long-lived or slow-lived, what we call a case-selected species. It should take precedence over juvenile survival. It should take precedence over reproductive rates. So they should be preserving their own survival over these other things in order for the population to persist. So what can a female do? She can limit her time on shore caring for an offspring, spend more time out at sea feeding, looking for food, trying to sustain her health. She can delay reproduction to a later age. Young females may become reproductively mature at a certain age on average, but if times are tough, they might delay giving birth to a pup to a later age just to preserve their own survival and health. Female could also limit her reproduction, maybe more often skip a year of giving birth or abort a pregnancy. This is an image that we had from the video cameras when we had them on Cape Resurrection, the hull out there. And this shows a female sea lion that aborted a fetus over winter and continued to nurse her offspring from the previous summer. And we see this, it does happen sometimes during hard times, that they do abort their pregnancies. An adult female could also wean her offspring early, and that might enhance her own survival, but it could limit the offspring's survival. Okay, so here's the more recent years of data, and what I'm going to show you from here on out is mostly based on a manuscript that I'm just about finishing up, and I'm going to send it out for review to a scientific journal here sometime in the next few weeks. Okay, perinatal periods, once again, yeah, this is the time the female spends on shore from when she gives birth until her next foraging trip to sea. And what we saw was very significant declines in perinatal periods, especially from 2015, 2016, 2017. So this tells us the females probably not so well fed during those years, but I'm not sure that this is really a huge concern. We're seeing about 6.5 days at worst, and still that is greater than some of the really bad years that they've seen down in California, some of the sea lions down there during El Nino years. So a little bit of concern, but these adult females are probably taking care of themselves by getting out to sea to feed a little bit earlier and sooner. Okay, delay of reproduction. We saw this too. These data here are showing females that were marked as pup on the rookery during the years 2007, 2008, 2010, and 2016. And those, since they were marked as pups, we were able to keep track of them over time and determine when they first gave birth. And it was pretty consistent for those earlier cohorts, 5.5 years on average that they were giving birth for the first time. But that 2016 cohort, almost a year later on average that they're giving birth. So this is something that they should be doing. It's a population buffering strategy in that preserving their own survival is more important than reproducing. If they can survive to a later age, then they'll have the ability to reproduce when conditions get better. Okay, limiting reproduction. So we did see effect here too. Before 2016, there was a lot of variability in the proportion of females that were giving birth in any given year. But 2016, 2017, 18, a lot fewer females were giving birth during those years. And more recently, it's leveled off, but at a lower level than it was previous to the decline. So we saw roughly a 10 to 15% drop in the proportion of females that were giving birth during those really rough years there. Yeah, brief word about cost of reproduction before I move on here. So basically what this means is reproduction and caring for an offspring has a cost in terms of the probability of future reproduction and survival for these animals. If they're energy limited, they might not be able to both produce a pup, care for it, and protect their own survival. And generally, you know, when resources are very abundant, you don't really see a cost of reproduction because they have enough food, they have enough resources to take care of themselves, their offspring, and reproduce. But when resources get scarce, that's when you start seeing the cost of reproduction. And indeed, that's what we saw, especially in terms of adult female survival. Here, prior to 2014, you see here with the gray squares, females that didn't give birth, pretty much equal to those that gave birth. So no cost of reproduction there. But beginning in 2014 to 2015, we saw a significant drop-off in survival for those females giving birth. And that was extended all the way up to through 2020, 21 for this these big drop-off in survival probability for those females giving birth. But then in more recent years, we've kind of leveled out, and we've not seen this cost of reproduction anymore, but we are seeing survival rates at a little bit lower level in more recent years. Okay, juvenile survival. Juvenile survival is not part of this paper because we published a broader scale paper on juvenile survival that showed that juvenile survival didn't change much with that warm water blob, which is really, really interesting. But here's the reason for that. What this graph shows you, up on top are those reproductive rates just on a different scale. But down the bottom are the portion of juveniles. These are offspring greater than 1 year of age that are continuing to nurse beyond 1 year of age. And we see the proportion of females that are nursing their offspring at greater than 1 year of age increased about doubles over the years 2016 to 2018. So what this does is, by these females caring for the offspring for an additional year, it basically buffers their juvenile survival. But here's the thing though, we also found that those females that nursed a juvenile for an additional year, that lowered their survival probability. That's not good. Okay, so here's a population trend analysis. This was published by us back in 2015. And this is when things were doing really well. Now I want to point out on the y-axis here, lambda, Greek letter that population biologists use to represent population trends. A lambda greater than 1 indicates an increasing population. A lambda less than 1 indicates a decreasing population. And back when we published this, we had increasing population. I showed you all those data. And it was pretty good. So we wanted to determine what changes in these different vital rates would be needed to cause a decline in the population. Now, if we look at this top line there, that's fecundity or reproductive rates. And it would take more than a 30% decline in fecundity to start seeing a drop in this population. We didn't see that. We saw like 10 to 15% decline in fecundity. This middle line, that's juvenile survival. You'd need about an 8% decline in juvenile survival to see a declining trend in the population. We didn't see that. There was no change in juvenile survival as far as we could detect. Now, the bottom line, and this is what I told you early on, that adult survival is the most important component of among the species. It would take just a little more than a 5% decline in adult survival to cause a decline in population trends. We saw a 10 to 15% decline in adult survival. Houston, we have a problem. So, can these findings help explain the 80% decline prior to 2000? Possibly so. What we're seeing here are selfless mothers, mothers that will take care, will reproduce and take care of their offspring more consistently than they will take care of their own health. And so a population could crash really fast and really sharply if adult survival is compromised. And this may be what has happened. But we need to do a lot more population modeling to take a little closer look at this. This data here are basically just explaining what the vital changes in vital rates are and behavior, and it's very telling in a way. So what does this mean for the future? Just a few years of a warm water blob, might not be a big deal. As long as conditions improve again out there, we see cooling ocean temperatures, we might be fine. We might just have a little bit of a decline in the numbers of sea lions out there, but hopefully things will return to normal again. But maybe not. This is an image from about a month ago, the North Pacific, and we see just a massive blob of warm water out there. And this is not 2 to 3 degrees Celsius above normal. This is, some of that area is 4 to 5 degrees Celsius above normal. Now, some oceanographers say, this is mostly just surface water temperatures. Once the winter storms start moving in, things should start cooling down again. And that may be the case, because here's an image from just 2 days ago. And you see a lot of cooling in behind that blob, but the blob has gotten a little more concentrated, and also it's starting to move eastward. If that persists at least a little bit over the winter, it could build again. So I'm not a physical oceanographer. I just play one on TV. But this is definitely something we want to keep an eye on from a biological perspective, given what the effect that these things have on our ecosystem out there. So if it keeps moving eastward, and if it starts intensifying, we're going to want to know that. We will be out again this winter collecting scat, just to see if there's any significant change in the diet again out there, and we will be monitoring the Chiswell Island rookery through next summer. And sorry, I just couldn't resist one more scream with all that's going on these days. And many thanks to all the hard work of several interns and technicians over the years. And these are just a few that have stuck with us for more than a year or two. And with that, I'll take any questions if you have any.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Really interesting questions for John.
I
Yes.
just have one. It showed somewhat that the populations were somewhat kind of coming back up a little bit in the 2020s, 2021s,
Yeah.
2021, 2022.
Yeah.
But the diet were changing. Do you think that maybe some of the smaller fatty fishes are coming back with the cooling? Or
Yes, potentially so. We didn't the diet study, was based on the years 2017, 2018. That's all we had funding to analyze at that point. We haven't analyzed diet from those later years yet, so, but it could very well be.
Okay.
Yeah. Katie, did you have a question? Yeah.
Did you see any females that came back not having a pup that didn't keep their yearling? Is that an option too?
Yeah, we do see a few of those, but proportionally, we see more females that skippy or giving birth will preferentially nurse a juvenile. But yeah, there's still a smaller proportion of those that come back without. Yeah, that. Yeah.
So how common is it otherwise that the juveniles or the yearlings would come back to the rookery with or without their mother? Or would they just be present on site but not necessarily interacting with her, but you're seeing that they're actively nursing? I'm just curious if...
Right, and those data presented there they're definitely with their mothers. They're actively nursing still. And there are some occasions where we see, females, are weaning their offspring after a year or two on the rookery and just actively caring for a newborn. And there are some companies, especially during really good years, we see some females will actually nurse a yearling plus their newborn pup throughout at least the summer long. We call them super moms. Yeah, so that happens a little bit too.
So is it just common in general that yearling would come back to Chiswell for this, and whether or not they're interacting with mother or not? I'm just curious how, like...
Yeah, that is a good question, and basically we have to look at that through our marked animals, because we don't know for sure if they're not with their mother, if they're there or not, unless they were marked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Have a question?
Just, just with the recent storm on Western Alaska, is there any tracking of storms and how they, or are they affecting sea lion populations? Because they just seem to be increasing over the years. So.
Right. So what we have seen, just watching at Chiswell Island, what most affects these sea lions are storms that happen during the month of June, during the peak season, because that'll wash the pups offshore, and if the moms aren't attentive, they're gone. But I'm not sure if there's any significant effect of storms during the off season.
Sorry, just one more quick one. And the trends seen at Chiswell, there's no other place in the state that's doing this as for this long and on a rookery with this amount of long-term data.
Yeah.
Are there trends seen in other areas where they are being observed that are comparable to this, or just curious where that's at?
There have been some detailed studies. No one else has been doing as detailed studies as we have at Chiswell Island. Basically, most of the data that we know of that estimates population trends especially are taken from National Marine Fisheries Service flight surveys that they conduct every other year in the Gulf of Alaska and every other year out in the oceans. But there have been a few detailed studies with camps put on some of the other larger rookeries, but they have a harder time tracking individual animals because those rookeries are much larger, and so it's easy to get these animals lost in the mix. Whereas we have excellent coverage of this rookery with cameras looking at them from different angles and all that. So this is a study that is unmatched anywhere really for Steller sea lions.
Thank you.
How transient are they as a species as far as repopulating maybe rookeries that had declined or whatever?
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, we there is has been some of that going on. Fish Island is a good example of that. It's over near Montague Island, a small rookery that pretty much just went extinct by around 2000. But throughout the mid-2000s, that started repopulating Fish Island. So that's one example of that. And so, I expect if conditions improve, we'll start seeing more and more in our area. But I'm not so sure that conditions are going to improve anytime soon.
And then another one would be as far as their diet of, say, salmon, how does fish hatchery reproduction maybe?
Yeah, I think that salmon, they get a good boost of salmon in their diet during the summertime. Summer's generally not a critical period for them because, there's generally an abundance of a lot of different types of fishes and other food. And that's why I specifically wanted to focus on collecting scat during the winter, because I think over winter is a more critical time period for them. They're dealing with freezing temperatures. A lot of the fishes are offshore, a lot deeper. Probably have a harder time finding food. So that's why we've been focusing our scat collections over winter.
Thanks again, John.
Yep.